Hey guys, before we get started today, wanted to let you know that ESPN is now in partnership with Peyton Manning's Omaha production to present Moxie Bets. Make bets with Moxie with betting expert Katie Mox and our merry band of gambling insiders as they preview lines, spreads, parlays, and props with personality and the kind of advice they'd give themselves. That's Moxie Bets. Listen wherever you get your pods. Welcome back to the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny, the only NFL podcast where one of the hosts firmly believes that Chargers defensive lineman Morgan Fox should now win Defensive Player of the Year and MVP. Gregg Rosenthal, do you know why?
I do, because he's got a prize-winning pooch.
Not just like a prize-winning pooch, like the best pooch, second best pooch, turns out, in the country. So, for those who don't know, Morgan Fox, former Ram, last with Carolina, now with the Chargers. It has a French bulldog named Winston that came in second at Westminster. I'm saying Westminster. You say Minster, right? You don't say Minister. Anyways, behind the Bloodhound. I think Winston should have won. I think he was robbed. He is much cuter than the Blood. I know that they don't judge on cuteness, but I think he was a lot cuter than the Bloodhound.
I have a friend who produces those, and I went to one like as a guest and brought my kids. Sneaky, fun live event. Maybe not even sneaky. Of course, it's fun. And I love the name Winston. Was also the name I gave my cat. I think the first pet I've ever named.
That's my mom's dog's name is Winston. She just posted a picture of him on the internet because he's a little banged up. So send my mom's Winston, who's a Shih Tzu mix, some love. But yeah, I guess I enjoyed reading about it. He kind of like was born into a dog breeding family, I guess. And yeah, it's a great story. It almost slipped under the radar too. I almost missed it until today. So I was very delighted to read that. Gregg, this is our first division preview. I feel like I had you on for the AFC East last year, probably.
I don't think I've done a division preview. I've done a lot of Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny. I don't think I've done one, and it arriving is really like oh wow, we're doing this. The season is coming. It's sort of a benchmark moment of like, okay, we don't have much time left in this summer. Do you guys do so? Gregg, for those who don't know, is one of the hosts of the incredible, very popular Around the NFL podcast. Do you guys do division previews? No, we should. Remember. We should. We're always like looking for how do we fill this time? That this would be good. You know, you asked that, but then my last 3 podcasts in the heart of June have been the longest podcasts I've done in forever. The last 2 both encroaching upon 2 hours. So I don't know how that happens or why, but it has happened. Division previews, though, I don't feel like need to be as long, so I promise I won't keep you as long as I've kept Ruiz and Tyson, everyone. I feel like that was like a soft warning to not honk as much as I normally do. And I think, yeah, the explanation for one of those at least being that long is just you had Nate Tyson as your guest. And the other one is 32 teams. Anytime I have 32 teams, I'm just screwed. Okay, well, we only have 4 teams, and we are doing the NFC East. I kind of teased it last week by going into a little bit too much detail on the Giants, just because I was thinking about them and watching them, and then I got around to watching all these quarterbacks in preparation for this week. And this is an interesting division. It's definitely one where I feel like the 4 teams could finish in any order. Do you agree or disagree before we get started? Wait, that the 4 teams could finish in any order? Okay, wait, that's not right. No. Okay, I think there's 2 that could win, and then there's like an upper half and a bottom half, and the upper half and the bottom half could both finish in any order. Do you agree with that? Yes. I definitely agree with that. And most divisions aren't like that with that big of a separation. I think we're actually kind of at peak NFC East right now because it feels like Washington and New York are down enough that we have a limited amount of national primetime games with them, but they're more interesting, or at least the Giants to me are more interesting than usual. And then the Eagles and Cowboys at the top. That's like the ideal NFC East because you're going to get 6 primetime games out of most of these teams usually. And I've spent way too much of my life watching the Washington Commanders. I love that the Eagles and Cowboys too, being spoiler, the upper tier teams are like they're perfect. Like they each have what the other needs, right? And they're really an interesting case study for like roster versus quarterback. And we'll get to those teams. Let's start with the Giants because you just said they're the most interesting. Let me just start off by asking you, did you feel better or worse about this team after thinking about them? Worse. I do this projected starters series, and I like after the draft and kind of go through each depth chart position, and it's a good prep for this type of pod. And I think they're going to be more fun to watch because of the coach and because the offense, I think, could be interesting. But after going through the defensive depth chart, it was like hard for me to squint and make a case like for them to have a winning record. And usually I feel like most teams you can do that with, and it feels like a stretch.
Yeah. It's interesting that the defensive coordinator is Wink Martindale, because it kind of feels like it's going to be actually a little bit similar to the Ravens defense last year. You know what I mean? In terms of the personnel he has. Let's start with the offense, though.
Like the post-injury Ravens
Yes,
defense,
the post-injury.
Like after they lost.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Yes, I'm talking about the Ravens defense we saw. Yeah, in the second half of the season. Let's start with the offense, though. Am I wrong to say you've been a little bit higher on Daniel Jones than the consensus? How do you?
That's right. I embarrassed myself once on your podcast. We've now done this enough times that I actually remember of bad takes I've had on this show. And I think I had just finished like a deep dive into Daniel Jones and Drew Lock. Just because I have a thing for like mediocre quarterbacks that no one gives credit for, just like mid-level quarterbacks. And I am excited for Daniel Jones, if only because like it's a waste of time to make excuses for mid-level quarterbacks, because that's probably like where they're going to end anyways. But I am happy for him to have a coach and a play caller that I am excited about, and an offensive line that I think should be his best ever, because his first 2 years in the league, he was second in the league in pressure rate faced and just did not have much of a chance. And then the injuries last year too. So I don't think he's going to like turn into a superstar, but I'm just happy. I want to watch him actually with this sort of group.
Yeah.
Is that crazy?
Yeah. No, I mean, well, I'm interested in seeing the Brian Daboll effect. So, the case for excitement for New York, aside from an improved offensive line, which the bar was so low, and you are betting on. I think Evan Neal was seen by a lot, as a very pro-ready prospect. He'll come in and play right tackle opposite Andrew Thomas, who's, I think now widely seen as a successful pick for them. The interior, they brought in some vets. Feliciano, who's okay, he kind of got bumped out of Buffalo. I don't know, has he played center before? I saw him in the depth chart at center. He was a guard in Buffalo, so. It's probably an upgrade. And then Mark Lewinsky, former Seahawk, Indianapolis. Again, it's just improvement there, some steady presence. But the Daboll thing is, I think, the thing why people feel excited. And I'm interested in your take on what that'll do for Jones. Because with Josh Allen, who we can obviously, no Giants fan actually believes like Daniel Jones is Josh Allen. No one is that delusional. But we saw what his offense did for him when basically Brian Daboll realized, okay, Josh Allen struggles with accuracy. I am just going to put a bunch of fast skill players on the field and let's get them wide, spread things out, get them wide ass open, and then the quarterback will learn accuracy over time. With Jones, the issues are more decision making, I would say, and how he responds at times to pressure, and which has been hard at times also obviously to assess because of his surroundings. Like, how do you feel that Brian Daboll can help him the way he did Josh Allen?
Well, the first is a protection, because to me, like, yes, they look way better on paper. That's a good tackle group. They're potentially great. I like the idea of just like improving with average offensive linemen. But more to that, I'm a big believer, like coaching is more important than anything on the offensive line. And that alone just feels like he's got a chance to dramatically improve. And he's a pretty good quarterback when he has time to throw. And he's a pretty good decision maker. And like he earns that nickname. Like he can throw dimes. And I do think Daboll will take advantage of his legs. He is not the runner that Josh Allen is, or Jalen Hurts, who we're going to talk about later. He's like not instinctive. He's not going to make guys miss, but I think they'll be able to work in his running like they did a little bit early last year with Daniel Jones with New York, that just makes life easier for him. So that creativity, and I just don't know like what Mike Kafka is going to bring. And I think that's kind of an underrated part of the whole equation here, because it sounds like he's going to call plays potentially. And that's just like, I don't know what I'm going to get, but I know a lot of people who really like Mike Kafka, and that combination, Dable and Kafka, sounds pretty good, at least to give Daniel Jones a chance.
Yeah, all the Giants reporters have been just excited this spring to see like a modern NFL offense, I think, take shape. The reports, oh my God, pre-snap motion, which is funny because they've got these two little fast dudes, Kadarius Toney, who we'll see what the heck they get with him, and then Wan'Dale Robinson, who they drafted, who seems to have a very similar skill set to Kadarius Toney in some ways. But one would think that Dable would be good at finding ways to deploy them horizontally, and like, to the motion point, like just giving Jones answers would be a huge upgrade. Giving him simple ways of getting information, would help him with, I think, some of the mental side of things. And you're right about the dimes. I think one thing that always struck me about Jones is whenever you would organize at the end of the year statistics by which quarterbacks threw 20-yard plus throws and who had the best performance, you'd always see Daniel Jones near the top. He wasn't throwing a ton because of the lack of protection, but if they're able to actually give him time to take some of those shots, and I imagine they're going to use more play action than they did last year, you could really see him generating some explosive plays. The one thing I'll throw a little bit of water on is sometimes the athleticism worries me. He's like athletic and he's fast, but he's so ungraceful to me.
Well, that's what I was talking about. He's not really a good runner. I mean, he's a fast runner, and if they call it at the right time, he'll hit some, but you don't want him out there too much.
He'll get hurt. Totally, he has gotten hurt. Like, he gets hurt. It's funny, like when we talk about which dual threat people always kind of hand wring about dual threat quarterbacks and their propensity for injury, when in fact a lot of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the NFL are very good at avoiding hits outside the pocket. Daniel Jones is not one of those quarterbacks. Like, you do not want him with multiple design runs per game, in my opinion.
No, he can help you in the red zone. He can scramble, but you get worried. Like, just because you're really fast doesn't mean you're like good at running the ball at an NFL level, and that does worry me. And I do wonder just about this group, because, like, look, the first month of the last season, I thought he was making some progress. He was ranked 6th by PFF grades through 4 weeks last season. He had that Saints game where he looked really good. When he gets protected, he looks good. But this receiver group's just weird. I mean, you mentioned, Toney and Robinson are kind of the same, and Robinson was a strange pick. But I mean, so Sterling Shepard. Those are three guys that you sort of would imagine would be best in the slot. You literally don't have a tight end that I can look at and think like, okay, that guy's going to play more than 500 snaps. Maybe it's Ricky Seals-Jones as their top guy, but I just don't think they're going to use a position. And then they have Galladay. Hopefully they get like a bounce back year. But it's just it's a strange group, and most of those guys, don't stay on the field for long. Darius Slayton, there's trade rumors about him. I have a feeling, though, I'm much higher on Kadarius Toney than you, or than most, because I feel like there's at least like a 10% chance that he's just incredible. Like that he is a top 10 to 15 receiver in the NFL. The way that he moved in the rare games that he was healthy for last year was just special. And there's just like not a lot of people in the NFL that can move like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was really hard to comp him. I remember back in the draft, because his movement skills are so unusual, and he doesn't really like run routes. He just kind of finds his way, like Froggers around the field, or in college. He would kind of just Frogger his way around the field. And it is an interesting group of players. Again, when we try to think to the Bills and what Ryan Dable did with those skill players, they were just so different, from the ones he has here. And that offense, of course, really took off with Stephon Diggs. There's no Stephon Diggs in this group, which does make things harder for Jones. But things will be easier than they were last year. So I guess just I'll wrap kind of on the offense by asking you, do you think there's any chance he sticks around? Because they didn't pick up the fifth-year option. You know that the history of teams that do not pick up the fifth-year options and then stick with these quarterbacks is I don't have it in front of me, but it's not a lot, if any.
I think there's a chance, because I think there's a chance with Dable on the offensive line that he plays like average starter level or slightly above. And I guess that's where I sort of am higher on Jones than most. Like, I think he's shown that he's an NFL quarterback. Like, if he's not in New York next year, if he has like a similar type of season, I think he'll have a job next year. He'll either be competing or he'll have a chance to start again. Like when he's protected, he makes the throws. There's nothing about him that's overly special, which is why he's maybe stuck in the middle. We didn't even mention Saquon, being back, and that's probably typical, but he could certainly help. But I think Saquon is kind of a reminder of something that I feel like throughout this offense, and it's true of the receiver group too. It's like it's a bunch of injury-prone players with absolutely no depth. And it's like then you could be in a situation like you were at the end of last year. And I think nothing made Daniel Jones look better than the games that they had to play without Daniel Jones. You know what I mean? Yeah. And if he's playing with a bad group of players again, it's just going to be tough.
I think your point about like what the chances of him sticking around next year, it does make sense just because for a bunch of reasons. One of which is like you, I do expect him to improve this year, and I do think he is. I've said on this podcast a lot, has been better than I expected, certainly. But also because like the Giants are not going to be a destination for a free agent quarterback next year. So to move on, they would have to be in a position where they really felt like they could take one of the rookies. And I think there's just some pretty significantly worse teams. I don't know, actually. I haven't really... Let me get back to that one once I get through the NFL. The defense is what gives me pause there because, well, I compared them to the shell of the 2021 Ravens at the beginning of this, which I feel like kind of says it all. It's a tough group. I mean, the hope is, Steve and I talked about this last week, Kayvon Thibodeau has a huge year.
Possible.
But he's going to have to because the secondary is just, like I said, it's the, I compared them to the 2021 Ravens. The end of the year.
Right, post-injury. It's crazy, well, because it's just a weird combo. You have the coordinator who loves to blitz more than anyone with the secondary that just can't possibly hold up. And I'm sure, I would think he'll adjust. They're not going to be as blitz happy as maybe like the best Ravens year, but I would assume he's still going to be Wink Martindale. And then you have Adoree Jackson, who is sort of the embodiment of like cornerbacks are really unpredictable, because he can and has been a really good player and is a fun player to watch, I think, for stretches. And then he can be hurt and he can give up a lot of balls. If you get a great Adoree Jackson year and you get Xavier McKinney improving at safety, that's like two pieces, but that's still just not flying in 2022 when most you're going to have 4 and 5 receivers to cover, and you have Aaron Robinson. I think they're going to have Julian Love as probably their other safety, and they're just trying to figure out who their nickelback is. It's why I didn't get the Bradbury cut. Like it felt very much like a small market, cheap team move because they're just not spending money. They're 30th in cash spending. They're one of the lowest teams in cash spending over the last 4 years. And I just hate that because it's like you're not trying to win as much as possible this year, which is like fine, but it's just like, why? Well, what do you get? What are you really getting out of it?
Yeah, Aaron Robinson was a slot corner. I mean, he's big, but
and they're expecting him to be outside.
He played a little bit outside last year, but yeah, I will say Jackson. I agree with you. Like he's kind of been up and down over the course of his career, and I think you saw a fit when he was healthy, like some up.
He was good last year. He was pretty good.
55% completion percentage, 73 passer rating. That's the lowest of his career allowed. Just 1.9 yards after catch per reception. So like if they still had Bradbury, I think I would be a lot more confident, but it's just you're really looking at like two guys that you feel decent about, and then there's the health concerns with him too. So but we'll see. If Thibodeau really is that dude and Ojulari takes another step, it's a decent front seven. Well, you also would need Blake Martinez to kind of be healthy, and I mean there's some other issues there, but Lawrence and Williams up front, combined with a good edge rush, that's definitely something to work with.
Yeah, and Lenny Williams is a key. Like he just wasn't as good last year. I mean, he was so good the year before, and he just wasn't nearly the difference maker. I feel like all those defensive tackles have like taken turns being the best of their class, and he took a step back last year. So it depends on like what you like and want as a defense. There is certainly a theory that it's like it's kind of like college. If you don't have as much talent as the other team, you do want crazy scheme guy, and you do want like the battleship guy who's just gonna like in Wink Martindale, who's gonna cook up like 6 game plans that give the opponent a lot of problems, and you could try to get to the middle of the pack. But I just feel like the depth at every position on this whole roster, like they're on their way up maybe, and I like the moves that they made this offseason for the most part. I actually feel better about the Giants long term than I feel like I have in a decade. But I feel like this year, if you lined up all their backups, they would be one of the worst backups teams in the entire NFL.
I feel like they're probably really unhealthy. I just was pulling up the 2023 cap. I mean, the Galladay contract is a punisher. But yeah, no, they have the 4th most cap space in 2023. So like they've really kept their books clean. And like I think that's just the kind of like your point about is just to feel like this roster can really contend with the pieces that they have and the lack of depth. I think, the success thing was kind of an interesting question for them. Steven went with Thibodeau just being like, go with the best guy. But I went with Galladay thinking like Daniel Jones. And I guess, I don't know. I guess that is because I am more of a Daniel Jones believer than I thought. I don't know.
Come to the dark side. He'll give him chances. That was what was good about him that first month of last season. He was making the best decisions of his career. And then as the season went on and it got terrible, he just started going back to like crazy Daniel Jones, run around, give guys chances, fumble the ball, which is probably the position he's going to be in with this defense, is trying to play catch up and give Galladay chances.
I would like to see him take risks. I mean, last year they were 28th in air yards per attempt. I like we said, like I know it's hard because you have to have that balance between the bad decisions and the Jameson kind of side of him versus I don't know the conservatism, but I'd like to see him push the ball downfield more in this offense. All right, let's go to the Cowboys. Very, very different situation. One of the other 2 favorites. I guess I'll start here. Do you have the Cowboys or the Eagles at the top?
No, I have the Eagles.
Okay.
I'm going big on the Eagles.
You're going big. After what? Didn't we both watch the Eagles playoff game this week? We'll get. No, you know what? Put a pin in that. Put a pin in that. Put a pin.
Yeah.
Pin in that.
Yeah.
That was a. We'll get to the Eagles. I'm still deciding. I'm going to make a call at the end of the podcast. I felt worse about the Cowboys defense, but better about the Cowboys offense after doing this. How about you?
I think I feel better about the Cowboys because my first instinct this offseason was to be down on them generally.
Lost a lot of talent.
And then, right. You lost a lot of talent. There's the whole, the Cowboys can't handle success thing, which sounds stupid. But man, it's been true for the last 20 years. Once they have anything good happen, they almost always the next season disappoint. They almost always go opposite of expectations, and I think there is something there. In
was it last season the disappointing season? Was last season the good season?
Well, that's maybe they avoided it, but no, I think they beat expectations for the most part. It just ended so poorly that that's all we remember. But you still see first of all, you still see Dak Prescott sitting there, which to me answers a lot of questions, and you just still see the top tier talent throughout the roster. You can come up with a case for how many different players on this team making all pro. I would say at least 5, 5 or 6. And there's just not many NFL teams that you could say that about.
Wait, I want to go through the roster now. Prescott, Lamb, I guess Tyron Smith, Zach Martin, DeMarcus Lawrence, Micah Parsons, and then Diggs.
Yeah,
that's 7.
So that's
I guess
even more.
Tyron Smith is probably a little generous. Probably.
But even he, when he played last year, was pretty close to Tyron Smith. So it's if he showed up, he's a big X factor. Either he's not healthy again, or he could show up and be peak Tyron Smith, like Trent Williams just had a season like that, or he misses 10 games and they're just not the same team.
The offensive line death. Woof. I feel like the Cowboys can just be kind of summed up in a single, or the prospects can be summed up in a single sentence, which is Dak regression versus defense regression. Which one triumphs? Do we get the Dak we saw weeks 1 through 6, or do we get the Dak from the second half of the season? If we get the first Dak, will that be enough to counter a defense that's not going to get us to any turnovers. It feels pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
Is that oversimplifying? Am I
no,
oversimplifying?
I like that. And I would generally answer, I'm going to trust in the quarterback. It matters more. But I think the problem is you could get Dak getting back to where we expect him to be. And the receiver group around him and potentially the offensive line is diminished to the point that he's got to play better just to keep their offense around where they were last year. And that's more what worries me. But I am someone that's like falling for the offseason hype pieces on Dak, that his body's looking good and he's going to run. Like, he's someone that actually feels meaningful for it, and I'm probably just falling for
it. How much of second half Dak do you pin on the high ankle? It was high ankle, right? Or no, calf, pardon me. How much do you think was the calf? What percent?
I don't know, a low percentage, maybe 20 or something, because he was just so adamant about it. He said that. I remember on the Rich Eisen show, he said, like, you guys keep giving me this out. You guys kept giving me this out. And this was after the season was over, way past when it was a factor. And it didn't necessarily seem like a physical thing. Maybe it was when you're missing throws, because a lot of it was decision making. And when your best strength, which is, reading the defense pre-snap, reading the defense post-snap, making good decisions, like being good at sort of everything, suddenly turns into you don't know which Dak is going to show up week to week or quarter to quarter in terms of decisions. It was like, who is this Dak? I don't know who this guy is. And I felt very unstable watching him.
That's why I don't know. I don't know enough about the human body to, I think, fully answer this question. But I don't understand how the Terminator from weeks 1 through 6 is making these decisions. Like, and that's why I just found myself being like, maybe it is a lack of faith in the body. I don't know. Well,
it certainly was with this lack of running, which I think just changed everything. Like, that he wouldn't take 5 or 6 yards, because he had some monster games. I kind of forgot about him in December. So that's sort of why I don't know if it was a physical thing. He had some big games, but they just were erratic.
I posted a stat, or I brought it up on NFL Live, not the biggest sample size, but reasonable sample size, where from weeks 1 through 6 on design rollouts and scrambles, he had a QBR of 94 and a completion percentage of like 90%. And then weeks 8 through 18, the QBR fell to 47. And his yards per attempt went from 10.63. I mean, you remember, when he would roll out those crossers to Lamb, the deep crosser. He had so many successful big plays. And then again, in that second part, 6.96 yards per attempt. I'm not saying that's like all of it right there, but I do remember watching him try to throw on the move and him just making shit throws, like some real stinkers. And like, again, I don't know if that's body, but it definitely factored into that second half. I do think it's worth noting. You make a good point. Like, he did have some good games, and that was also what made it confusing. Because I think if it was all consistently bad, we'd be more likely to blame the body, right? Because we'd be like, okay, clearly he wasn't himself. But every now and then he would look really good. I don't know. The whole thing was really, really confusing. I was really bummed sneakily by the loss of Cedric Wilson. Like, when they traded Amari, I was like, that's fine. Cedric Wilson should be a number 3 anyways. But I don't mind James Washington from Pittsburgh, and they drafted Jalen Tolbert. I do think the offense is going to look different, and I'm very curious to see how Kellen Moore responds to the challenge of the change in personnel. But I think by and large, the offense, like you said, will probably be somewhere between the just absolute worlds destroying, battle star we saw, and then whatever we saw at the end of the season.
Right. I mean, Kellen Moore, it sounded like a couple weeks ago on your podcast, is starting to lose Nate Tice, which I feel like is troubling for him.
No.
Like, once you lose Nate, it's in trouble.
Orlovsky's been a little bit critical too.
That worries me. Like, I trust his opinion on the play calling more. I don't trust Mike McCarthy to like make up for things and be overly well prepared. I am very worried about the receiver group. I mean, that is my concern. Tolbert, I mean, who knows? At least I don't, unless you have a hot take. James Washington, to me, if he was on a different team, I wouldn't be sure that he would make the team. I mean, he was pretty up and down, with emphasis on down in Pittsburgh, which is like receiver heaven. And I know he was with old Ben Roethlisberger the last couple of years, but I just think they are a team, and they have, I believe they have the cap space to do it. That just seemed like they could really use a veteran, whether it was like a Will Fuller. OBJ's probably not going to happen, but there are a few players out there. I don't even know
Hilton's
if
still out there.
T.Y. Hilton. Like, add Will Fuller to this team. I would like to see that. I would like to see that.
Also, Michael Gallup, we should mention, is coming off the ACL.
Right. If he was healthy, I wouldn't have just kind of gone on that whole rant there. But he's coming off of an ACL, might not be ready for the start of the season. So I just think it's a lot to ask him to step in and be like solid number 2 for the first half of the year at the very least.
I feel like at the end of the year, I made a joke about Cedric Wilson wearing number 1, and he just made me eat my words so often that I might be overrating him a little bit too much.
No, they could use him. If he was on this team, I feel much better.
Good player. Also, beautiful arm. The touch when he threw the ball. My God. What team is he on right now?
He's on the Dolphins.
Oh, no. The jokes. No jokes. Yeah, the defense is the regression thing. I mean, so I guess defense, we talked about it with Deontay Lee on the defense pod, finished first. They're a fascinating statistical story, right? Because they've been first in like DVOA, EPA, and then in, third down conversion rates, top 3 and all of that. But then 20th in yards allowed, 29th in yards completion, fairly boom or bust, obviously led the league in interceptions. So there's the concern of like, okay, well, how much of that success was based on turnovers? A lot of it. So I think the feeling, I don't think they're going to be bad because I think there's just too much talent, but more likely than not, they're not going to be one of the best defenses in the league this year.
Right. History tells us that, just with defenses and especially how turnover dependent they were. But like, I would totally listen to a Cowboys fan pushing back hard and like seeing the path for them to do it again. Because Lawrence and Parsons, if Lawrence is healthy and right and kind of playing how he was towards the end of the year, that's the best duo in the league. I think the defense kind of goes as far as Odigizua and Gallimore go. Gallimore I really liked as a rookie, didn't get to play much last year. Odigizua looked last year like he could really be a player. Like if their defensive tackles,
awesome at first,
right
when he first started playing, I was like, oh
and
my
faded.
God, this guy.
If those two guys step up and they're both young players in a pretty good situation, like this is a pretty nasty looking front. And they have great continuity on the back end. It's almost like they might have too much continuity. I don't know. Like they just rolled back the exact same group.
Well, I think they were hoping that the Kelvin Joseph was Kentucky, right? The corner that they drafted in the second round would be a starter, but he's involved in some, it's like I don't want to get this wrong, but like a murder investigation.
Well, I read that a lot, and he ended up, going to the police and saying everything that happened. He was in a car which a murder occurred, and he wasn't the person, that happened. And
so much more responsible than me right now. Thank you so much.
But it is very confusing, and the Cowboys seem confused by it. He was shaken by it. He was practicing, and he did go to the police immediately and say what happened, and someone was arrested. So I don't know what his status will be, but I don't think he would be a starter right now. Anyways, It would probably be Lewis and Brown. Yeah.
I mean, I guess I was thinking in the second round, the hope was that he would be, but like Brown and Lewis were a lot better than maybe not, fantastic. But
your boy Dan Quinn, like he can do new things. It wasn't much cover 3. It was like cover 1. It was
the most cover 1 heavy team in the league. I think that the content. I mean, shoot, he got a fantastic season out of Jaron Kearse. Like I didn't see that coming necessarily. So there is a lot of continuity in the back, and I do think if Lawrence is healthy and that interior D-line group, someone really steps up, whether it's Gallimore Hill or Diggy, I think they call him, that you could see a top 10 group, if not the best in the NFL.
Sam Williams is getting like Cowboys draft pick hype too, but I could see it as like the third rusher, second round pick for them. And again, it's such a good situation. I'm not worried about Randy Gregory leaving at all. Like Randy Gregory gave them 350 good snaps in 2 different stretches over 7 years. I think people got a little carried away with like what a loss that was.
One thing, I think it was because of the drama, like of them trying to get him.
Right.
Yeah,
but they'll be fine. Pass rush is their least concern. I'm curious how they'll use Micah. What do you think there?
So I was just about to say, if they do use Micah more as an edge rusher, I would say off-ball linebacker is a little bit of a concern for me. Van Der Esch still being there, Jabril Cox up and down. I do think this team could struggle in run defense, but I don't think that won't be like the death of them per se.
I'm curious what Dan Quinn will do, because most games last year, it was like either Micah Parsons is a pass rusher or Micah Parsons is a linebacker. And if you look at the snaps of where he even aligned, like it really lines up that way. It was mostly all or nothing. At the very end of the year, the Cardinals game where he played really well.
Yes.
And in the playoff game too, where he made some good plays in the running game. He was like the only one who did. It was pretty mixed, and it was like leaning towards off-ball linebacker, but with 40%, 35% pass rusher, which feels like it's not even enough. I want him more as a pass rusher.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because on one hand, you feel like probably the more confusion, the better. And you do kind of want to see almost like that mixed usage in game. But then on the other hand, like if he's one of the best edge rushers in the NFL,
right?
Let him rush the passer. I don't know what his odds are for Defensive Player of the Year, but I would definitely put money on that. All right. Speaking of money, we're going to take a quick break, come back, and talk about should we do the Commanders first? Or the Eagles?
Yeah,
which would you rather do?
Let's close big with the Eagles. Let's finish with the Eagles.
Okay, all right. We'll talk about the Commanders and everything that's going on with them on and off the field. Oh boy, I don't know why I said speaking of money, because that wasn't actually. There's not really this isn't a money story with the Commanders. It is a little bit, because money at one point seemed to be the one thing that might actually lead to owner Dan Snyder's ousting. The reports that a former Washington employee was accusing them of skimming, leading people to say, "Oh, finally, that'll be it for the team." Let's talk about the football team first, though, and then talk about these hearings and the latest with Dan Snyder, if that's all right with you. I just feel for Commanders fans. Don't you feel for them?
Yeah, the ones that are left are a hardy bunch, and I know some, and they are as beaten down and as dark in terms of their jokes. They hate their team basically, but they're just I can't quit it anyways. I just can't.
I feel for them because I have not met a Commanders fan who defends Dan Snyder. That's why. They're anti Dan Snyder more than anyone. It feels like they just are exhausted, and it sucks. It really, really sucks. But we'll talk about him in a second. I did want to talk about the team. No longer the team, the Commanders. I'm actually surprised how quickly I got used to saying that. Do you feel the same way?
I'm not used to it. I still actually like calling them the Washington football team. I wanted them to stay it. There's this YouTube clip or Twitter clip of Carson Wentz I really recommend you find, where it's like a hype video of him landing on the plane, and he's like, "All right, Commanders fan, landed in Washington. We are really getting ready to finally start to take command." And it's just the least hype thing I've ever seen, and it really makes me laugh.
Let me say something nice. I didn't like the trade. I criticized the trade. But Carson Wentz is an upgrade over Taylor Heineke.
19th and 20th, by the way, in completion percentage over expected from week 7 on. So I agree he's an upgrade, but he's still one of the lower tier starting quarterbacks in the league, I would say.
Under pressure, he was 25th in CPOE. I run that back up. So, oh no, pardon me, that's wrong. When kept clean, which actually makes sense. Doesn't that make sense?
Yes. And that's why I sort of don't believe in him as a starter. To me, that's the number one test. It's kind of why I think Daniel Jones is an NFL starter. Can you deliver when you're actually protected? That's sort of the baseline. And if you can do that, at the very least, you'll be in the league 12 years and play a lot.
The thing with Carson Wentz is he's going to make more. So, the upside story with him is that he'll make big plays. He is athletic. He will push the ball downfield, which is something Heineke could not. And he'll do those things generally when he is under pressure or he's on the move. But when he's not is, I think, when you've seen some of those really... Well, no, that's wrong. You've seen some of the bonehead mistakes when he's under pressure. But when he's not, you've seen kind of a lack of consistency. And why did I start optimistically and now I'm like going negative? Okay, I'm going to try to say something optimistic. Again, it's going to be a more interesting offense, don't you think?
Yeah, I think you can argue he has better weapons here than he did in Indianapolis. And while I certainly would take Frank Reich over most anyone, including Scott Turner, your listeners are treated to two of the foremost members of Scott Turner Hive. At least, I mean, like it's a low simmering hive. It's just like, I think he's better than people think. He's. Well, I don't mind Scott Turner. I think he's going to help Carson Wentz. I don't think he's going to be a negative.
Certainly been dealt. We talk about quarterbacks and players being dealt challenging hands. He's been dealt probably one of the worst hands, play callers wise, since coming there. Do you think that he's just going to, like, you know, with Wentz, he's going to say, all right, here are all these plays. Here's the Fitzpatrick playbook I had going into last year. Let's just roll with that.
No. I think he'll look at what the Colts did to some degree and build off of that, in that I think Reich did a good job protecting Wentz. It's a lot of schemed up throws. I think that's what Turner can do really well. Like him and Norv. I think not that Norv's underrated, but I think people forget what a great play caller Norv Turner was for most of his career. I think he'll get guys open, and he has guys that can get open. If Samuel stays healthy, you have Jahan Dotson, who I know you love, Terry McLaurin, and Curtis Samuel. And Antonio Gibson when they want to use him, or McKissick out of the backfield. And it's like, those are four guys that are just like walking off the line of scrimmage open, and they'll try to get the ball out of his hands. And Wentz's biggest issues are, inaccuracy and decision making. And I think the Colts covered that up for big stretches of the season, and he's streaky. And I think Washington will try to do the same. And with those players, I think you'll probably get some pretty good days out of Carson Wentz.
Well, we should note also that the Washington offensive line is kind of as good as... Is that too bold? I mean, with the left tackle situation in Indianapolis last year.
Similar. I think they're in the same ballpark where they're like average to better than average-ish. And that's where I'm kind of trusting in coaching, because they were...
Top 10.
Yeah, last year
Brandon Scherf's gone.
They lost Scherf.
But then you bring in... let's see.
Norwell and Turner. So you're kind of trusting on the coaching to like take these older guys and make it work. And I kind of do, just because they've been pretty solid as a line the last 2 years.
Bears fans were making fun of me on Twitter because I was like, why did the Bears let Charles Leno walk? Well, we would have been the best Bears offensive lineman sorry, I don't know why I'm rubbing dirt in the face of Bears fans. I'm sorry.
No, they deserve it. They
cruel and unnecessary. Well, they didn't ask them to pay Jimmy Graham, so instead of Charles Leno. I like this group of skill players. I think, obviously you would need Curtis Samuel to stay healthy, but and I assume Terry McLaurin's going to get paid, and this will.
But even then, if Dotson, you were higher on Dotson, I think, than I was. But if Dotson is half as good as kind of the hype pieces coming out of Washington and good off the bat, McLaurin, Dotson, even if Samuel's out and like Cam Sims or De'Ami Brown is your three, like let's fly. That's pretty solid. That's nice.
Well, between McLaurin and Dotson have something in common, which is they both have really, really good catch radiuses that belie their size, which one would assume would help with Carson Wentz. It is, I would say, I wouldn't say like one of the better groups of skill players in the leagues, but certainly above average. Brown really let me down last year. I thought he would be much better. I really liked him at UNC, especially, I guess if you've got Wentz, again, with the premise that he's going to push the ball downfield more, one would think Brown could benefit from that the same way he did at college with Sam Howell, who's, of course, on the Washington roster. And How do we feel
They're
about
a good
Antonio
run
Gibson?
blocking team. Like they'll run pretty well. They drafted Brian Robinson in the 3rd round, which was weird to me, but I think just a sign they're going to want to run a lot. Antonio Gibson, maybe you get a little more out of him by using him a little less, but I think we both love Antonio Gibson. It's why I was frustrated by the Wentz trade, because I think you could have just put in some of the quarterbacks that got backup type contracts like Teddy or Jameis, who had the mid-level one, and they would be just as good or better, I think better in this situation for less. You wouldn't have had to give up the picks.
I think I would like to see Antonio Gibson used less. I think some of his production suffered a little bit as the year went on. I don't know. I'm sorry.
It could work.
I feel like
it could work. They improved a lot offensively last year. They actually went from 32nd in DVOA, I think, to like 21st. So it was really all about the defense that they collapsed.
Also, I was totally wrong. I had a feeling I was wrong with those Wentz CPOE numbers. He was 26th in CPOE when pressured. So, and 19th kept clean. So it's all not great. Not great. Yeah, I think success for this team, what is success for this team? I mean, do you think that they know that, like, where they are? Like, what do you think is their assessment of their own place in the world?
Well, I think it's the 3rd year with this regime, and I think that's always a big year, and you need to show something. So I think success is everyone keeping their jobs next year, which I think is being around 500. And to me, that's success. Like, the bar should be higher, but for Rivera, he's a defensive coach, and for the defense to be that much worse in year 2 and not look better necessarily on paper personnel wise going into year 3 than you were when he came in, like that's concerning.
Do you think the defense is going to be better?
Yes. I mean, I think they'll be
hard to be worse.
Like average.
Hard to be worse.
I think they went from 3rd to 27th in DVOA, and it feels like right in the middle is about where you could expect, because they still have a lot of good players.
So probably the most confusing unit in the NFL to me, both in the front and the back. I would say in the front, just relative to the level of talent they had, even when Chase Young was healthy. Obviously, we've all talked about this a lot. The pass rush was utterly disappointing. 22nd in pressure rate with a 4-man rush, 19th in pass rush win rate, blitzed a lot more than one would expect. I think that ticked up when Chase Young got hurt. Really, like, Jonathan Allen was the star of this defense, and which was shocking, I think, given some of the expectations of Young coming off of that rookie season.
Right. They were much better when Chase Young and Montez Sweat got hurt. Obviously, it wasn't because they got hurt and the players behind them were better, but it was just the fact that they were the worst defense in the league, just about. And a lot of it was on the back end. And that, I guess that's sort of what I'm getting to with Rivera, where it's a big year for him, because I do think he's a good defensive coach. And I think his Panthers teams often were better than you expected because they were so fundamentally sound. They were very consistent and they seemed very well coached, and they would max out what they got in the back end, I think, through communication and like coaching and just not making mistakes. And they were like the opposite of that as a team last year. And I think he was scrambling. So whether it's him or Del Rio, on paper, they have enough good. I'm not in love with their secondary, but they have enough good players in the front that they should be okay, but they're not as deep. Like, that's what I was saying, when their roster, I don't think, is as good as it was a couple of years ago. You lose Tim Settle, who was a good backup for them. You lose Ioannidis. They're not quite as deep and as fearsome as they used to be. Yeah,
I mean, the secondary kind of figured things out as the year went. I mean, relative to the first half, it'd be hard not to be better when they just looked totally out of sorts. I talked about, with the X Factor, I picked William Jackson III and talked about how, they brought him on. The thought was that he would be like they would play more man coverage, and they just kind of didn't. And he really, really struggled with zone. But as the year went on, you saw him get a little bit more comfortable. Obviously, they moved Landon Collins, who's no longer this roster, to be a linebacker. So moved him up closer to the line of scrimmage. And then, but it kind of felt like everyone kind of fell into their natural place a little bit more as the year went on. But down year for Kendall Fuller. And it's the same players, right? Like, so I still like Cam Curl, one of their safeties, a lot. It was like a 7th rounder, I think. But I don't, like, there's not like an injection of talent here. You're just hoping that the coalescing you saw in the second half of the season continues. The Rivera thing is interesting because this team drafted Jamin Davis in the first round. Do you think his hope was that he could be like, I wouldn't say like a Kuechly, but like, I don't know, play a much bigger role in this defense than he has?
Maybe more of a Thomas Davis, but
yeah.
Like, right. I mean, he there's the reports coming out of Washington this year that's like he looks less lost. Like he was lost a year ago and he's no longer lost. And what? That's concerning because it really sounded like he's not even totally guaranteed snaps now. And that's just, it's a passing league. And like, yeah, they might have a very good pass rush and that'll make up for everything. But if your backs, when your linebackers on the field are him and Cole Holcomb in pass coverage, and then Jackson, who you mentioned, is up and down, it just feels like there's going to be a lot of holes there to throw to.
Cole Holcomb's been okay at times. I remember watching when I first started liking Cam Curl. I think is when I first started liking Cole Holcomb. I was like, he's
good. I mean, he was a 5th round pick, and he's probably one of the few young players on this roster that I think they will be giving a long-term extension to.
Yeah, interesting. All right. So just for those who haven't been paying attention, this last week with the House Oversight Committee on Congressional Reform, I hope I got that right, I don't have it all in front of me, finally had their hearing on the Washington football team. Dan Snyder did not come, but then at the end, Carolyn Maloney, representative of New York, subpoenaed him, which was a interesting curveball at the end. I don't know if people expected that or not, but
you sneaky are kind of fascinated by the legal aspects of all this. I feel
I'm not just sneakily fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by all of it. They put out a 29-page report, which I encourage everyone to read. A lot of it has come out already in the Washington Post with regards to all of the terrible aspects of Washington's culture, the basically acceptance or alleged acceptance, and brushing aside of sexual harassment. You guys are probably familiar with the cheerleaders scandal, which all of this has come out over the course of several years. Now, more recently, there's the revelation that a female employee also accused Dan Snyder himself of sexual assault in 2009, and they settled with her. His camp settled with her for, I think it was like $1.6 million. I guess, Greg, what strikes me the most about all of this is kind of reading the report. Well, there's two things. There's the NFL side of it, which we can talk about in a second, but then there's the Snyder side of it. Because when all these stories would come out with Snyder, people would always ask, well, did they get him? Like, does this connect to him? But when you read the report, like, it connects to him so much, both in the past with the actual allegations and then in the present where, as the NFL or Beth Wilkinson was doing her investigation, which of course was never written down, even though the NFL, it comes out, did at one point want it written down, Daniel Snyder himself was conducting his own investigation, like sending private investigators to people's homes. This all happened like last year. This is not ancient stuff. So I think, to me, the biggest takeaway is just how much Snyder's fingerprints are over all aspects of this story.
Yeah, I think you said it well, and I think they're trying to like emphasize turning the page and that, hey, we hired Ron Rivera and he's changed culture, and we hired Jason Wright and he's changed the culture, and you hit the nail on the head on Twitter, which is like, well, no, some of this was happening last year. Roger Goodell had to answer for Dan Snyder not being the day-to-day operator of the team to his knowledge, using his words, when there's some pretty obvious evidence that he has been involved in it on a day-to-day basis. And The Athletic has a good, like, kind of a listing of how many ways Ron Rivera and different people have talked about that, and that some of what's happened has been in the last year. And I just think that everyone involved like knows the story. Like Roger Goodell knows the story. I feel like everyone who works for Washington knows what the deal is, and you can't say that it's going to be different or that something has changed as long as the owner is there. And that's the big question. But like, how can you say that anything is different if nothing at the top has changed? And I don't feel like the NFL's change to Tanya Snyder was meaningful.
I responded to someone who said, no one really cares about these owner stories. And I said, well, no, I think they do care. I think there's just like a lot of fatigue because with Daniel Snyder at this point, it's just like literally hard to keep track of it all. I think I missed a ton of stuff, by the way, in my little recap there. But then
including that Snyder didn't notify Goodell. That was one thing that came out of the 2009
reportedly, right, which it was supposed to. Yeah, the NFL was so right of the sexual assault.
I mean, this has been 2 decades, and that's part of the thing that I have to imagine is frustrating for Roger Goodell. But they asked him if he would change ownership, said he didn't have the power to do that. He does have the power to recommend the process start, which would involve a vote. And there hasn't been any indication that would happen.
I think there should be more pressure on Roger Goodell to do that. That was something I didn't know until, it sort of came out in all these proceedings. And I think that it's kind of like, so I was going to say, people say, well, I said, I think there's been fatigue, and I received a lot of replies. Well, a lot of people are tired of the story because we feel like nothing will happen, which is like kind of like a sentiment that you think you could apply to a lot of society in this country right now. But I think that's totally accurate. And so then it becomes okay, well, we have all this information. There's the question of what can Congress actually do, but then there's the question of kind of, okay, well, what do we want? What are we asking for here? And I think, asking Goodell to actually call these owners to task and like kind of move, I guess, shift the locus of responsibility so that he no longer can be a total meat shield for all of them, but actually put it to a vote does matter. So I think that's probably something that I don't know. I'll be focusing on more, I think, with my commentary. It's just endless, man. It's just like endless with this guy.
It's so depressing, and it's coming at a time when they're trying to get a new stadium built, which they were trying to get public funds for. It's like you said, all their fans have been beaten down so hard, like rooting for a team that just doesn't love you back. And it should be like one of the prime NFL franchises. It was. And I guess I would just leave it with like, it absolutely impacts the team. And that's the thing where I think it gets lost a little, because like what he's being accused of and everything that he's done is so much more serious than whether they're winning or losing. But I don't think it's unconnected that this type of leadership has been in place while they had 2 seasons with double-digit wins over the last 2 decades, rife with controversy at basically every turn. I mean, it's all connected.
I think that's right. God, I think everyone in that building probably is as exhausted. Those who were not involved or, even part of the quote unquote new regime are probably as exhausted as the fans themselves. All right. Something to monitor. God, the NFL these days. It's like we went from the 20 lawsuits being settled to that story in like 2 days.
I know, and it's like June. We were just talking about that around the NFL podcast last week, and it's just like, come on.
Okay, Eagles question. Outside of the quarterback position, where would you say this roster ranks in the NFL?
Oh, wow. I mean, top 5 for sure. I would have to like go through it, but my instinct would be they'd be in like, in my top 3 or 4. I feel like I'm starting this off by alienating Eagles fans with the way I'm wording these questions. But to the thing I said earlier about like them and the Cowboys, if Dak Prescott was the quarterback, where would you rank them power rankings? Ooh. Well, I'm very high on the Eagles, even, with Jalen Hurts as their quarterback. So with Dak Prescott as their quarterback.
We'll get to Jalen in a second, yeah.
I think because I would be feeling spicy, I think I'd put them tops in the NFC, and they would be right there, probably behind the Bills and the Chiefs. I would put the Bills and the Chiefs first. I didn't think Nate's Chiefs number 1 offense ranking was that spicy. I was like, I think I might put them there too, or at least. Yeah, so I would put the Eagles like right behind those guys if they had Dak Prescott.
So I've started this Eagles praise, but I think probably Eagles fans listening are like not thrilled. Let's talk about that offense. Let's just rip the Band-Aid and talk about the offense. I alluded to the fact that I think we both watched the wild card game, and I feel like too many of my feelings about teams and players right now are based on the last time I saw them.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
And I don't want to do that with Jalen Hurts. I really don't. So I actually, tried to go back and watch a couple quarters that I remembered being impressed by him. In the second half of the season. No, why are you laughing?
Nothing. I mean, I like that you're the mental gymnastics you're getting to try to convince yourself into Jalen.
The thing you're buying the offense. You're not buying Jalen necessarily when you're buying the notion that this team can be successful. I think the question though you have to ask is what we saw from the Bucs and a couple other defenses against this offense, which is of course very unique and built around not just Jalen, but also the dominance of the run game, which of course is very closely tied to Jalen. Is that something like what we saw for the Bucs, which I think I characterized to you as disrespectful, the way that defense played him?
It was a tough scene. It was tough.
Is that something like are we just going to see that from? By the way, I want to know. I think it takes a good defense to do what the Bucs did. Because even if you come into this game saying we're gonna crowd the box and make Jalen throw, well, it's actually not that easy. They do have answers, but the Bucs not only did that, but I thought held up very well in coverage as well behind them. So it wasn't like guys were like wide open, in this game. But I just wonder, like, if you're a good defense, are you worried about this offense?
Yes, absolutely, because they have so many problems that they present for you, and did so well against some really good defenses. Like the Saints. Who else am I forgetting? They tore up the Broncos. Now, what the Bucs did, you're right, was disrespectful. There aren't a lot of Todd Bowleses. There's not a lot of teams that can have a blitz package like that. But do I expect Jalen Hurts to see a ton more aggressive blitzing? Because if you looked at his season, he basically played well except for 4 games, and it was the 2 against the Bucs and it was the 2 against the Giants. And there were some similarities with what they did. Patrick Graham really dialed it up. And Hurts didn't make quick decisions. They were counting on Hurts holding the ball. They were counting on being able to cover those guys. I think A.J. Brown is obviously an answer for that. Now you have 2 guys who are going to be very difficult to cover one-on-one. But yeah, if you're worried about the Eagles' offense, I think that's like one of the first things that they're going to have to answer early in the season. But I think if it was that simple, like people would have been doing it more often and having greater success, and they can hit, like, if it doesn't work, they're going to hit you with big plays like over and over.
Yeah. I mean, Jalen Hurts can hit on some of those deep balls that I think are going to be available to him in this offense. I think right now, I think people talk about him like he is a running back, and which I think is a pretty unfair characterization of what we saw like the second half of last season in particular. There will be accuracy struggles, especially over the middle of the field at times, and he will hold on to the football too long. But because he's so dominant as a runner, he only has to be like a good passer, like a decent passer. Like, he doesn't have to make special throws. And I think having like this special wide receiving group will, I don't know, just like make life so much easier for him that it won't matter.
But here's the thing, and now I'll just start ranting on Hurts. So shut me up if it's going too long. But to prepare, you watched like all the playoff games and you watched a bunch of teams. I just watched a ton of Jalen Hurts, and then I was like, oh, I'm out of time. But that was fun because I like watching Jalen Hurts. He makes more plays throwing like per throw than I think anyone gives him credit for. I mean, he's absolutely a playmaker, like as a passer. Like his big time throw rate that Pro Football Focus has was very high, especially considering that he didn't throw that many. Like, I think that's difficult. Nate and I'm trying to get him on team Jalen Hurts here. And I'm not even sure Jalen Hurts is going to be great, but I just don't think he needs to be that much better for this offense to be really explosive. But I think part of my thing with him is he is going to make those crazy like Russell Wilson throws sometimes.
But Russell Wilson is accurate on those. So those like 10 to 20 yard, I wouldn't say gimmies necessarily, but like those intermediate crossers, Russell Wilson will be at. Like, and Jalen isn't consistently,
no. What I was going with Nate
he throws some pretty bad balls.
Right. Nate's going to say, and I totally understand it, like counting on winning with like iso ball, which is like this just like go make a play. Like it's tough to do over and over. But I just think those plays will be there. And they are going to be a part of their offense. And especially when you have Devontae Smith and AJ Brown on your offense, it's going to help.
And Dallas Goedert, who like low key has become one of the best tight ends in the NFL. And is so, I feel like is like actually underrated. We always argue about like who's underrated, overrated, because rating is so like who's doing the rating. But I actually think he is underrated because he's so freaking good. And somebody is always going to be open in this offense.
And he should have time. Like he holds the ball too long. I mean, that's his number one thing is he has to make quicker decisions. He led the league in time to throw last year. Which
of course is exacerbated.
But he can stand back. Part of it is because he can. And their offensive line is going to be awesome. Mailata should only get better. Dickerson had a pretty good rookie year, got better as he went. You bring back Kelsey, Lane Johnson. You have a second round pick in Juergens. It's like on the bench. You have Andre Dillard as your swing tackle, which is a nice like reserve. And so he's going to have that time. And I guess I just don't want to move on from the Hurts part of it without just like emphasizing that as good a runner as everyone thinks he is, I just feel like he's better than that.
Actually, I felt that way watching the Bucs game, even though it was like tough at times. Right. Especially, but it was hard because as it went on, like, okay, I do think you can argue this offense is not built to play from behind. I think that is something we can agree on. But even in like the second quarter when they were, I don't know, down like 3 scores or whatever, and they were running zone read and the Bucs read it correctly, he would still pick up 9 yards because he's so strong and so fast. And I think like that's a really, like, he's not just a runner, he's a special runner. Like he is right there behind Lamar.
Right. I've loved running quarterbacks since ever since I'm a kid. You just want to like, it just makes the game more fun to watch. Whether Cunningham was my first, but then Dante Culpepper, and I put him in that sort of category at least early in his career of like a Cam type of runner. If you just look at like 10 plus runs last year, and you look at his attempts, the 2 best runners in the league in terms of when they run the ball, are you going to get a first down? Were Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. And I just don't think in this year that he's gonna like totally back off running. I think they know that's what he does well. I don't think they know if he's gonna be their quarterback forever. And I think it's gonna be a part of their offense. And he makes guys miss. He's good in short areas. Like he has patience, he has vision. Like he's a runner. Like he's not quite Cam, but like he's close to that ballpark. And then you just don't need to be that good of a passer. Like it's just going to open up things for you and certainly the teammates. And that's why I just think the upside of like the big plays that he could generate, and the downside is going to be there. You might have games like that Bucs, but the upside is like so high. And I think they could cook.
I think if you get ahead, it's the Next Gen Stats. I posted this. They have this, they do expectation. So they have rushing yards over expectation, meaning like, how many yards is the average back expected to pick up down in distance, and where with the blocking and where the defense is. Miles Sanders was expected to average 5.3 yards per carry last year. 5.13. Pardon me, 5.13. But still, that is abjectly insane.
That's
and some
stupid.
of it is the
That's
offensive
sort of
line.
I mean. That's
some of it is the blocking, but playing next to Jalen Hurts does that. That I think is why, even though Miles Sanders like produced at a high level, Eagles fans are still like, like, is he that good? Because it's playing running back in that offense is probably the most fun thing in the NFL. Most fun.
Right. Right. And Jalen can do that, and then he can scramble. And this year, instead of like Quez Watkins being, his number 2, they wasted a lot of time on Rager. It's like Quez Watkins is your 3. Goddard's really your 3, but Quez Watkins is your 4. And then I even like Zach Pascal as your 4th wideout. I love the backups on this team. I feel like this is a team that can withstand injuries. And then the last thing on the offense is just they did change, like when Shane Steichen started calling plays, they kind of revealed that after the season.
Yeah.
It is about when things went well. And I think they did a nice job overall. And so I kind of like this coaching staff.
Yeah, and they confirmed that he's going to be the primary play caller this season. Okay, defensively, also a very deep group. Boy, James Bradbury hurts. Just looking at the depth chart, just like what? I think I had them 6 on my defensive rankings. Let's just start here. Where do you have them approximately? Is that too rich?
No, I mean, it's another team that can like withstand injuries where they're 8 deep on the defensive line, and I think the Bradbury, signing kind of completed that secondary. I'd probably have them like 8, 8 or 9. I remember I was trying to help. I was trying to come up with my rankings. They'd be in there.
Yeah, I think. They definitely. The corner group isn't deep, by the way. So they do need all these guys to stay healthy. But once I talked about this with defense, I don't have to rehash it, but Avonte Maddox much better in the slot. I guess the safety group is a little bit dicey.
They bring in Jaquiski Tart, who at least is a.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, underrated signing.
He can play.
Yeah. They've got a lot of these margin, Hassan Reddick's. What? Now he's on this team. Instead of you go from Ryan Kerrigan to Hassan Reddick. You go from Eric Wilson, Jannard Avery to hopefully Nakobe Dean. If you play, I would say if Nakobe Dean isn't healthy, linebacker is still a problem on this team. So that would be where. And, there were so many question marks about Dean's health around the draft and him dropping where he did. I think that might be where I would say, okay, we could still see some of the same issues with this Eagles defense at times.
No doubt. That's kind of a boomer bust position because he also could be a huge upgrade. And if he's playing next to Kaiser White, who was always a player I really liked with the Chargers and I think came into his own.
Really?
Suddenly that goes from a really bad group to a promising group.
I don't know about Kaiser White, but yeah.
You're not in?
Not really. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a team that ranked 29th in DVOA on passes over the middle of the field, and I think that's again that could be where sort of Ramseyan, like the Rams, that could be kind of where this team lives or dies a little bit on defense. But, otherwise, it's just depth everywhere. Jordan Davis doesn't really need to play a lot. That was fun, by the way. Watch even the Bucs game, the Eagles defense played well in the first half. And it was just kind of fun to be oh, right, Brandon Graham is still freaking awesome. Just watching all of the guys, even though they're getting older on this defensive front, they're all still really, really good. And now you've got this influx of talent and
it's possible he won't start either, Brandon Graham, or at least it'll just be rotated evenly. We should go through, it's kind of why I liked the Eagles a lot last year going into the season, at least to beat, they were over under 6.5 going into the year. And I just thought they'd be average because both lines are so good. But the defensive line, Brandon Graham, and you mentioned Reddick kind of as the top edge guys, but they also have Derek Barnett back, Josh Sweat, who is on a big deal, is good. You have Javon Hargrave in the middle, who was 3rd in pass rush win rate. Fletcher Cox is back. And then Milton Williams, who I know they love internally and had a good rookie season as a defensive tackle, and Jordan Davis. Just that is that it's not quite 2017 level, but that is deep.
That is a lot of rotation. Yeah. These guys are going to be, it is truly a masterclass in kind of aging out your superstars, right? On that front.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't have the depth chart right in front of me, but I do feel the cornerback group behind those 3 guys, behind Slay, Bradbury, and Maddox, there could be some problems there. Cornerback has been an issue for them.
Absolutely, which is why Bradbury felt like a really nice late signing, which I think they've done a good job of. But you're right, absolutely, that's their weakness. And I don't know if I'm in on the offensive coaches. I don't know if I'm in on Jonathan Gannon or the defensive coaches in
head
particular.
Coaching candidate Jonathan Gannon, not in.
I don't know.
He's certainly got the players to work with. It'll be interesting to see if that defensive scheme evolves at all. But the Eagles are just the roster is just so good. Just to put a cap on it, they are my pick to win the division. I've gone back and forth because of the Dak thing.
Was it my Hurts enthusiasm? I don't feel like it was, but
no, you kind of had. I mean, they're gonna be a rushing monster. Well, gosh, like who was a team that? I mean, I guess if the Ravens' backs are healthy and now that they've got an invigorated offensive line, they'll make a pretty strong push. But and then I don't know. Yeah, I mean, who challenges the Eagles as a rushing offense right now?
Right. I just think big plays in the run game and the pass game. I feel like they have like a Super Bowl ceiling. Like I'm not saying they would be my pick to make the Super Bowl, but I think they have like a chance. And it's just funny that like to me, I would think of the Eagles as one of the analytics teams, and like I just love that like their analytics consistently is just like pay and draft huge men as much as possible. Yes. Just big people. That's who we want to pay.
Yeah, it's hard to think that like an offense, this is what I said during the NAPOD, like an offense that finished top 10 last year would add AJ Brown and not get better. It's like, it's fucking AJ Brown. He's so good. They're going to be really fun to watch. I would put them high, forget power rankings. They are definitely high on my list of teams that I'm excited to watch this year. Very high, actually. So good for you, Eagles. All right, I am picking the Eagles. You convinced me. I wish I just didn't watch that game right before we did this podcast.
It was depressing.
I think Eagles fans feel the same way. That's what
everyone thinks of with Jalen Hurts too. It's what everyone thinks is that game. There were other good games.
Yeah, I think Eagles fans are I don't have my finger on the pulse, although I do have a lot of them in my life. But I think there's a similar level of like tentative excitement, but coupled with pain from that last experience. And yeah, we'll see. All right. As always, let's wrap with a few questions for our guest. Dinks and Dunks, 4 questions for Greg, 4 from me, 1 from Lenny. I'll start here. So I haven't talked to you about the Patriots much this offseason. Where would you put your optimism level on a scale of 0, picking first in the draft, 10, Super Bowl?
6. It hasn't been.
Do you think they're a wild card team?
I think the AFC is so deep. If they were in the NFC, I would say yes. I think in the AFC, they're just like one of many of those teams in that mix. They tend to beat expectations when they have these off seasons that people aren't that excited about. I have no idea what he's going to be doing with the defense. Obviously, the offensive coaching situation is a concern, but I think I'm pretty high on Mac Jones generally, that there's this idea that like, well, he was good as a rookie, but like he's not going to improve. But I don't understand why that would be the case. I think his ceiling is still very high, like being a top 10 quarterback this year. And if that's the case, then they can be pretty good.
Who is like the player you see his ceiling as?
Phil Rivers. I mean, it's like a different generation.
No, that's a good one.
But in a like little different. But yeah, I think that's where I would go.
That's a fun one. I can totally see that too.
He's got some traits. I think he did a little more than people noticed last year. It wasn't all that conservative.
We'll talk about the Patriots at some point, but I thought he showed a lot more movement skills than I expected. I liked the way he moved in the pocket and commanded it. So, all right, question 2. Do you believe Rob Gronkowski is actually retired?
No, because Drew Rosenthal doesn't.
Why does he say it? I don't understand. Like, why say it? What's the
Maybe it must feel good. It's kind of like
going to your own funeral,
or just like whenever if you're someone that like jumps jobs a lot, you really get that Twitter celebration like every year and a half or so. And like Gronk gets that celebration,
But here's the thing: if you do it too many times, you don't get the legit. Like I noticed, even this time around, people were like, "Oh, here's some of his greatest plays. Yeah, he was good." Like I feel like if you cry retirement too much, people you get a little celebration fatigue. I wonder if that's going to happen with Brady. By the way, when he does retire, because I'll tell you, I do not want to do as much content as I did because he retired already.
No, and in this case, I mean, with Gronk, I think even before Rosenhaus, his agent said that he might be coming back, and then he kind of thinks he's coming back. Like everyone was already saying that. So I think it was instructive that my old boss, Mike Florio, did a post where he didn't put any sources, and it's like I know how things happen. Where he opined that it came down to money, and that like if basically he wasn't going to get the money he wanted, then he doesn't want to play the full season. But that indicates to me he's probably coming back for half of it.
Playoff run.
If they're good. Yeah.
Okay, question 3. If they're good.
They should, right. I mean, they should be the best. I would probably put them, right there at the top.
Over the Dak-led Philadelphia Eagles. Question 3. So Amazon has Thursday Night Football. They have a studio show. They've got Ryan Fitzpatrick, Richard Sherman, Tony Gonzalez, I think. Anyways, Fitzpatrick and Sherman, I feel like whenever we would have a discussion like who's an athlete you'd want to see a studio show, those are probably the 2 names that came up a lot. I was wondering if you have any like underrated current players that you would like to see on a studio show.
Great question. Do you have any while I'm scrambling?
Well, I've been pushing for Cam Hayward to be on more programming, and now he has a podcast after coming on my podcast. That's what, hey athletes, hey NFL players, you come on the Mina Kimes show, you get your own podcast. He's also with Omaha. That was announced. I think he's excellent. And he gives takes, which is, that's always a question. It's like, will you give takes? Which is a lot easier after you've retired, obviously, although Sherman was never afraid of giving takes while he was doing it. Who else would I like out of the current?
I can jump in because suddenly I just realized like the Saints have so many. Like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson popped up just because whenever he has a microphone, that dude cracks me up, and I just love his energy. He would bring a different energy, and he is
very humorous.
And I think Honey Badger and Cam Jordan on that very team would both be good at it. Honey Badger would be great.
I ran into Cam Jordan at the Combine, and we were talking about this, and he kept denying to me that he wanted to go into. And I was like, "Come on! Every time you do an interview is like an audition for like a studio show." I mean that in a good way. He's fantastic. And he's like, "No, it's not for me." And I was like, you protest too much. He seems more than any current player like the obvious guy that we're gonna see on TV. But I don't know. He denied it. All right, question 4. Content recommendation. Give me one.
I'm gonna go book. I'm gonna go Emily St. John Mandel.
The new one.
Her new book, Sea of Tranquility. Why am I blanking on her first book that was just made into an HBO show?
Station 11. Station 11.
Which, like, I wasn't like the biggest Station 11 as a book fan ever. But I loved her last 2 books, Glass Hotel and especially Sea of Tranquility. And I saw you tweet about Jennifer Egan's new book. And I feel like if you like that book, it's very different topics, but it's about the pandemic and about like modern technology, but not about the pandemic. And it's just so well done. But I would say to read those books in order, unfortunately. Reading Glass Hotel first, even though it's not totally connected, it's a little connected, makes it even better. Great book.
A lot of people have recommended Sea of Tranquility to me. Okay, I have 2 audio recommendations because this is usually I listen to basketball podcasts, but now I don't for obvious reasons. So I've been listening to other things. One, I have been just like burning through back episodes of Freakonomics Radio, the Stephen Dubner podcast. The latest one is about blockchain, which I've been kind of wanting a good blockchain explainer and like how blockchain works and is used in non-Bitcoin functions. He has a great episode about why NFL long snappers make $1 million and why like that sort of specialized job has value that I would recommend people listen to. Also, it's way back in the archives, but I really enjoyed that. And then musically, I didn't love this British band, or they're from the UK, Wet Leg. It's 2 young women. They had a single that went viral called Chase Lounge last year that I didn't love, but I've been listening to the album and I really like the album. And I would, it's also called Wet Leg. So
okay, I need to do this. This is the second time you've mentioned this to me. So now I'm definitely doing it. And you were right. Tokyo Vice, by the way, is kind of dumb, but fun dumb, but dumb. Wait, if we're throwing out music too, then I'm throwing out the new Vince Staples and Sharon Van Etten albums. I've got them like just on total repeat. Love them both.
I haven't listened to this Sharon Van Etten album. How does it compare?
It's my. I would say it's my favorite. This is what
people are here for.
It's my favorite one.
In hour 20, a discussion of Sharon Van Etten's catalog.
My favorite.
Okay,
one.
last question. Wow. Okay, I'll give that a listen next. As always, comes from Lenny. Lenny knows that you're a big fan of the Celtics. Would you agree that he has better ball skills than Jaylen Brown?
Oh, I mean, Jaylen Brown was one of the only Celtics who showed up in those last 3 games, so I got nothing negative to say about Jaylen Brown. That's untoward.
What about Derek White?
You've got a lot of negative things to say about Derek White and his hairline. You ruined Derek White.
No,
I hope you can live with that. The second you mentioned it to me, he was ruined and he didn't play another good game. It's your fault.
Oh, I said nothing.